Hey, everybody, it's Dr. Mark Hyman. I'm the director of the Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine, and we're here right in the center in Cleveland. And we have the pleasure of having Dr. Jeffrey Bland, who is not only a close friend, but he's been my mentor, teacher, and the leader of the functional medicine movement, and literally tirelessly over the last 35, 40 years has traversed the globe to bring the concepts of the new medicine to physicians and healthcare practitioners everywhere. It's really been extraordinary, and so happy to have you here today, Jeff.
Well, I can't tell you, Mark, I'm blown away. It's just so impressive to be here. You know, the last time I was here at the center was the opening of the original center, which is a couple of years ago. And to see what's happened in the evolution and the extraordinary staff you have and the new facilities and the excitement of the center. By even last night in the restaurant, my server was telling me as a patient of the Functional Medicine Center here at the Cleveland Clinic how amazing the treatments have been and the staff and her outcomes. So it's just for me like living a dream to be here. So thank you.
It's pretty amazing. Like, I think it was close to 20 years ago. We were in some dinky little hotel and motel
Yeah.
in Gig Harbor trying to put stuff together, and we had like 20 people in the room. There were more faculty than I think students, and
Yeah.
now we have probably 4,000 people watching online. So Jeff, you were in your grand rounds that you just gave. You were talking about this evolution of medicine from pathophysiology based to systems biology based. And the functional medicine is really the operating system that allows us to apply the concepts. And what really has always astounded me about you is your ability to synthesize disparate information from all different specialties, all different scientific fields of inquiry, and see the connections and the dots that pull everything together to tell us a new story about how the body's organized. And it's so different from what we all learned in medical school and in healthcare as healthcare practitioners. And as you've been the student of all this data for so many decades, where do you see us heading next? I mean, how does systems biology become the medicine that we practice? How do we shift into that as a society, as a field of inquiry?
Well, I think, Mark, and you know this as well or better than I do, that there are really two drivers for that. One driver, I guess, is a utilitarian driver, which is called economics. And we recognize that the system that we have been on, which is this crisis-based system, is just not sustainable from an economic model with a rising burden of chronic disease and an aging baby boomer population and even younger people that are coming up with conditions like autistic spectrum disorder that used to be never heard of in medicine and now 1 in every 100 kids or whatever, 120 kids. So I think that there are all sorts of drivers economically that are causing the need for a new model to be developed. And it's not just a new model of reimbursement, it's a new model of how we approach. I mean, you've said it, right? You have to both change the medicine you do and how you do medicine. So that's number one. Number two is this emergent technology that is coming not just as a fad, but as a driver for disruptive changes in healthcare, which is the information database coupled with the cloud-based computing power that we will carry around, each one of us with us. And my grandchildren now are going to have a whole different view of reality of what healthcare is, because they will have cloud-based information that will record everything that they have had on their health record that will travel within trajectory. We know that it's the serial analysis. It's over time that you really start to gain an interrogation of what you need to do to keep healthy and reduce disease. So I think that the combination of the technology with the economics are the drivers. And we have a lot of other people that are saying, oh, it'll never happen and this and that won't happen. Well, I mean, no one would have ever believed that personal computing would have happened because IBM owned computing, right? We didn't need personal computers. But now we look at our smart devices, which are making everybody's lives different as a consequence. So I think that's what's happening in healthcare.
Yeah, it's true. It's interesting you mentioned about the ability to track things over time and use that to modify your behavior. I mean, there are amazing companies coming out that are outside of healthcare that are going to disrupt healthcare. Like one company I've heard of recently called Viome, where they send you a kit. You collect your stool, you do a finger stick blood test after drinking sugar, you measure your breathing, you do all these different diagnostics that are in a little kit that are very simple that you do at home, completely bypass healthcare. And then you're going to be getting serial measurements of your biology to kind of inform your actions. But the thing that interests me is how do we sort of sort of take the shift? Does it happen outside of healthcare, or is it going to happen in healthcare? Because, we're at Cleveland Clinic here, which is a pretty traditional organization, and I've been actually astounded at the openness and interest from so many doctors here, and even some of the institute chairs and the people who are really leaders here in discovering how to actually bring this to fruition.
Well, I think it's actually a combination of both of those. I don't think it's going to be an if or. I think it's going to be multiple different ways of delivering care with a new model that's based on function. And so I think there will be institutional settings, there will be public health applications of what we're talking about, there will be individualized private clinics, there will be health extenders that are involving even like high-end fitness centers that will be offering aspects of this. So I think we're talking about a robust transformation of the healthcare system, moving away from a complete disease-centric focus into a health focus. Now, we're not going to completely leave behind disease-centric expertise. That'll still be there. But let's face it, you know and I think most people know, we don't have a health system at all. We have a disease care system, and so a new economy. If you think of what happened to the U.S. economy with the development of the microcomputer, think of what would happen with a wellness-based new business opportunity, with all these new companies. I was very amazed when I saw this photograph of, in President Obama's second term, of him meeting in Silicon Valley with the leaders to talk about healthcare, of which there was not a single person at the table that was really a traditional healthcare person. It was Google, and it was Apple, and it was information technology companies that are all now really looking at the health space as digital information that will empower people to make positive changes. So we're going to see an economic model that will manifest itself in many different ways, I think, in the system.
Yeah. And I think even at places that are traditional, there's breakthroughs that are happening that are challenging the model. So when we see now facts that don't explain our theories, we have to change our theories.
That's right.
So, for example, here at Cleveland Clinic, we have Karis Eng, who's a geneticist who's studying the microbiome and breast cancer. We have Stan Hazen, who's studying the microbiome and heart disease. So you've got oncologists studying the gut, and you've got cardiologists studying the gut. And this is just the beginning. And so we're seeing these kind of massive shifts, and when the facts we have don't explain our theories, we have to start to change them. It's very tough to do for a lot of people because it's like throwing out everything you learned instead of actually being able to sort of adapt to it. So in terms of the microbiome, I mean, this is now such a hot topic, and this is like probably 30 years after you brought it to our attention that the gut plays a role in health in ways that we never imagined. And now it's just being pretty much every day you see related to cancer, related to heart disease, related to diabetes, to obesity, to depression, to autism, to allergy disease, to all the things that we just never even thought of looking there. Mm-hmm. So maybe you just sort of as a historical point of interest, and then where are we going with this? How did you kind of figure this out? And then where is the next step of the microbiome in terms of clinical medicine?
Well, I think you've really used the right word there, historical. So where do we actually go? And I would go back to Elie Metchnikoff. Now remember, Elie Metchnikoff, who took over the directorship of the Pasteur Institute from Louis Pasteur when he passed away, that Metchnikoff won a Nobel Prize in medicine, right? And what did he win it for? He won it for immunology. He was the discoverer of innate immunity because on the French seacoast, he happened to make an observation, this is the way the story is told, that he picked up a sea urchin, spiny, and he took the spines and he poked a starfish and made a penetration with the spines of the sea urchin, and then had a looking glass, a magnifying glass, and he was able to see the recruitment of what looked like little microbes. Remember, this is the age of microbiology, of bacteriology. And he said, why are these little organelles, these little things, coming to the site where I punctured it? And then when he started to study this, he found out those were phagocytes and that this was the innate primary primitive immune system. Yeah. So here is a guy who started with a view of the immune system, who wrote then the book Prolongation of Life. And what did that, it was written in 1899 in French and then translated into 1902 and in English. And what did that book talk about? It talked about the gut microbiome, what we call the microbiome, and the treatment of chronic disease using installations of Lactobacillus bulgaricus, yogurt by enema. And he said so many diseases could be treated by restoring the innate immune system of the gut with the proper biota. So this goes back to 1902. And then we could roll through all the various histories of how it ultimately got to the point in the 21st century where we're now saying, whoa, this is a real important part of the complexity of disease. What drove that, I think, are a number of things, but one of which is, as you mentioned, the technology of being able to actually do microbiome analysis. So technology drives knowledge, knowledge drives new conceptualization, and then old things that we held onto so tightly just kind of disappear and they're replaced, and everyone says, oh yeah, I always believed that. Oh yeah, I always was on that, yes. So that's what's happening right now, I think.
And then how does that get applied? Because there's so many different companies out there trying to design fecal pills or specialized probiotics. I heard about a company in Germany that does very advanced stool testing and then customizes your gut flora probiotics based on that. I mean, does that make sense?
Well, I think what we can say, and this is a historical feature set of any kind of paradigm shift, that first you've got a new frontier. And everybody races into the new frontier and all sorts of things are tried. It's a little bit of Darwinian natural selection because you have all these different people with good ideas, they think they're good ideas, and they joust about on the playing field until something starts to emerging, you kind of get smoothing. We're in that kind of great unknown right now. My belief is that there are certain things that are coming out to be important, like general phyla, like looking at the difference between Bacteroidetes and Firmicutes, and kind of asking what are the kind of things we learn about health and disease that are related to alteration of some of these big phyla. And can you then modulate the big phyla by diet and lifestyle? And the answer is yes. And then what type of diet? And is it prebiotics or probiotics, or is it a combination thereof? Because this is an ecology, isn't it? It's not just one bug. It is a whole ecology of the terrain, la terrain, going back to, again, to Pasteur. So I think that we are starting to witness just the emergence of some of the actionable things that are coming out of this. And there's a lot of stuff that's going to fall by the wayside that people try that really sounded interesting in the moment but probably didn't stand the test of time. But the key is that the theme of what Rob Knight is doing at UCSD, that's real. That's going to change the paradigm.
It's pretty exciting. You know, when I first started functional medicine over 20 years ago, I began, to listen to you all the time. I put on your cassettes back then and would rewind if I didn't understand something. And, you brought forth concepts like inflammation and the gut and, detoxification and the immune system in a different way. And these ideas were just so absent from medicine. I remember trying to test a CRP in 1997, and I was like, what are you doing, And now it's sort of standard medicine. What things are you seeing in the literature that like projecting forward 10 years are going to be now known to be critical for healthcare?
Yeah, so before I answer that, let me give you a little bit of cred here. Let me give you a little props. And you, like many, many others, were exposed to my ramblings. But the difference between you and many others is that you did diligence on those ideas. You went to Paul Ridker at Harvard. You went to examine CRP. You went to, you had a discussion about atherosclerosis with oxidant inflammatory disease, right? You actually started to do your own interrogation to see what stuck. And that's what separates, I think, the evolution of an idea to become real from that of just a way station where people are interested in the moment and it goes away, is that level of deeper learning. And you really have embodied that. And I would encourage anybody who comes into this field, as I've often said, when you come into functional medicine, I warn people, and I know you do as well, be careful. This is like getting a virus in your nervous system. Once it's there, you can't. It's a non-communicable disease, right? It sticks with you because it's opening up your mind to interrogation. Now, as it relates to the question you asked about what's on the horizon, this is an unbelievable time of technological change. Now we have single-cell sorting capability that can be done with PBMCs or with standard blood draw, that you can actually treat these blood cells with a variety of different antibodies, just very small amounts of blood volume. You can put them through cell sorting machines that are all robotically controlled, and you can actually look for the first time at intracellular crosstalk. You can look at what signaling mechanisms are being disturbed in that person between the adipocyte and the macrophage, or between the vascular endothelial cell and the monocyte. And when you start being able to interrogate at that level, virtually non-invasively, so that you really understand the architecture of that person's physiology in ways that were never possible before, now you have precision. That's where we're heading.
I mean, and it's true. And I think, one of the frustrations for a lot of people in functional medicine is there's so much data, there's so much to know, there's so much information. And the dream that I've always had is, given the speed of development of technology and analytics, to be able to actually take all this data, like the millions of data points, which no physician can correlate and pick up everything, but put it in through artificial intelligence, start to build in a way a doctor of the future that can point you into the direction that you need. And I think putting that together with the genomic revolution, with the personalized quantified self revolution, with the changes in economics in healthcare, with the ability to sort of create outputs from that artificial intelligence that would guide practitioners where to think and where to go, that's my dream. I think if we could get to that, because there's no way that you're going to take, a physician and give them the 20 years of experience that I've had, and I still struggle with all the data because it's a lot to put it all together. I get the functional medicine headache sometimes. Yeah. And I think, I would love to see that some, tech company gets created that builds that, because I think people like the Institute for Systems Biology are trying to do that. It's just sort of the hurdle that I think will take us to scalability.
Yeah, I think that you're right. The technology of machine learning, this is what Watson was able to beat the world-class Go player using this kind of a construct. And I think machine learning is going to be very, very helpful in being able to access this complex data set. However, and this is important however, it's still a human enterprise. Yeah. It will always engage the practitioner with the patient in a sentient human relationship. In the absence of that, it's not going to be successful. It still involves understanding the sociology of that person. It still understands the texture, the nuances, the things you can pick up from years of experience by reading body language of people and how they language things. And so I think that this is the advantage that we'll have with technology, but the more high tech, the more need for high touch, right? We know that.
Totally. So, Jeff, what are you most excited about that's happening in medicine?
Well, I think, first of all, I'm going to say the obvious. As I sit here in the Cecilia Scott Weatherhead Center for Functional Medicine at the Cleveland Clinic, that has to be an exciting thing for me, right? For 40 years of aspirations to see some of these ideas actually be put to test with real people and real experts in a clinical setting. So, Mark, what you've done here is there would never be a greater joy that I could experience in being present at this center. So, thank you. You've given me the greatest treat that I could
Well,
ever
it's
have.
a whole team, Patrick Hanaway, our whole leadership team. It's amazing how this has infected Cleveland Clinic. We have physicians coming from all over to want to work with us and be patients and collaborate with research. And, there still are some naysayers, but the interest and openness and curiosity, that really you've paved the way for is just so beautiful. And we're also grateful for you to have led us in this path.
Well, thank you. And to just even have a small part of attribution to that is extraordinary. Let me say lastly that, it was years ago, and this would be probably 30 years ago, I would say, that I started talking about the psychoneuroimmunology, right? I started talking about the connection between the nervous system, the immune system, the gut, and the endocrine system as one super system. I think that construct is really the learning system that's going to transform medicine, because it forces you into a systems biology way of thinking. It breaks down the barriers among different medical disciplines, subspecialties, and it starts aggregating together as to how the outside world influences the inside function of the human in ways that are profoundly different than just driving for a differential diagnosis. So this center really embodies that principle of that interconnectedness of those fundamental features that translates outside to inside function, which is, to me, where the future of medicine really lies.
Yeah, it is pretty exciting. I mean, we just started 2 years ago, maybe almost 2.5, and to see where we've come and to see where we're going, and we've got research studies going on. When you talked about reimbursement at the beginning, I got here and I thought, okay, everybody's going to be focused on value-based care, and I was so excited about that because I believe that, people believe that evolution isn't real, that climate change isn't real, so science doesn't always persevere, but money does, and we believe that we can get better outcomes at lower costs. And so I went to Toby Cosgrove and I said to him when I got here, okay, let's roll our sleeves up and get our hands dirty and let's get rolling on value-based care. We want to measure all the outcomes. We want to measure all the costs. Who do I talk to? And he's like, well, we don't really do a good job at that. We can report on our results, but to really look at true outcomes-based data and to really look at total cost of care, I mean, there was no sharing of data between payers and providers. So insurance companies and the healthcare systems didn't share data, so it's hard to measure costs. And I'm like, well, how are we going to do value-based care? And so we've really been enabled here to start to do that. So we're working with insurance companies. We're putting in outcomes data research on every single patient that comes in here, fills out an outcomes research protocol, and it's showing that it works. Because at the end of the day, what's going to change is not more RCTs. It's all about the Benjamins, the dollars. And if we can prove that we can do better at lower costs, they're not going to care about the rest of the RCTs. They're going to want to implement it. And I think that's going to be the tipping point where we really shift into the future of healthcare. It's pretty exciting.
Well, I want to give another shout out to you and to Dr. Hanaway, Patrick Hanaway. Your presentations, your collaborative presentations at our 4th annual Thought Leaders Consortium in Phoenix last October 2016, in which you did a 1-2 tag team description of what's gone on at the center, your outcome-based research metrics, and how this is frame shifting from a quantifiable, evidence-based efficiency of delivering care to chronically ill patients with successful outcomes. That's the frame shifter. That was, to me, the point I will always mark with a stake in the ground. This is the day it started to change. And without information, without publications, and without analysis, it's a great talk, but it won't convince people. And what you started to do is really lay the hard evidence that we need to take the naysayers and at least get their attention. And as you know, if their attention doesn't come to be, data will ultimately leave them as artifacts of an evolving next step because they won't be part of the next system. So yeah. I just want to say, good job. That's where we really can make a difference in creating the dramatic underpinning of this change that's going to occur.
Yeah, we're really at that tipping point. It seems that it's really happening, and that people all over the country, all over the world, there's just this movement to a new kind of medicine. And the fact that Cleveland Clinic was willing to take a risk, to be innovative, to change the paradigm, is just to me mind-boggling. I mean, when we started this, well, you started a little long before I did, but I just never imagined this actually happening. I just thought we'd be on the fringe and it would be maybe 50 years, but it's actually accelerated.
Well, let me again, just to give you a little support for what you've said, when we put together now the program for our 5th consortium meeting, our Health Thought Leaders Consortium, which will be in Seattle in October of 2017, we went out and asked who else is really exploring this model other than Cleveland Clinic. And we were amazed at the number of other places, thanks to your leadership and model here and the success you've had, who are really now in serious consideration how they're going to introduce these concepts in their structure. So we have the CEO of the 4th largest health system in the country speaking at our meeting, Rod Hochman, who is the head of the Providence St. Joe's Swedish health system, which has, I think it's something like 4.5 million lives under coverage, 52 hospitals, I think, in which they're looking at how they're going to use your model as an introduction into their system. So this is transformative.
What does the CEO of Cleveland Clinic know that we don't know?
That's exactly right. Exactly.
Which is great. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for coming all the way from Seattle to Cleveland and joining us and taking care of us and really showing us how there's an actually operating model that exists today, imperfect as it is, that is the translation of systems biology into clinical medicine. And I've been doing this for 2 decades, intensively with tens of thousands of patients. And it's not perfect, and we don't heal everybody, but it's such a better way of thinking. And I think that's what you said in your grand rounds, that functional medicine isn't a modality or a specialty. It's sort of a new way of thinking about how the body works and how to work with it. And it's really a meta philosophy or meta theory. It's like the way I think about it, it's sort of the natural laws of biology. How do we actually work? And that was so interesting. It's like Einstein said, I'm not interested in the spectrum of this or that element. I'm interested in the thoughts of God. The rest are details. And that's what we should be asking and not sticking to our old ossified ideas. So thank you so much for joining us, Jeff, and hopefully we'll see you again.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you.